Finan O'Connor would talk the back legs of a horse, and thank God that he can, because he's had a massive influence in the industry. He's had a massive influence on the growth of the industry and the moves towards integrity. And but one of the downsides is that he's had up some of this Killowen time. So we're going to have to blast our way through 9 samples. So when you look at your sample box today, there's actually we're not going to go in the order that the samples are in. Okay, so I've split up this order so that we can work our way through it differently. So first thing we're going to taste tonight is going to be the bonded experimental series stuff. So we're going to go talk through it as well. I'm also going to give a very quick introduction into Killowen Distillery. So this is the 4th time the Killowen Distillery has been on this Whisky Live Festival and Belfast Whisky Week, and I'm going to give you the quick introduction. Killowen, Liam, come back, you're rascal. So Liam Brogan, who just ran away there now, okay? Liam is a co-founder as well. So we've got Liam Brogan and Shane McCarthy and Brendan Carty are the 3 co-founders in Killowen. And basically, we set this distillery up a few years ago because we wanted to make the distillery, we wanted to make whiskey that we wanted to drink. We believe that we had our fingers on the pulse of the whiskey industry, and we wanted to drink stuff that didn't really exist, and we wanted to make that more accessible. And that's the same message that we've been carrying through with our bonded experimental series as well. And it seems to work. So far, it seems to work, and it's becoming quite successful, thankfully. So Liam, you've just gone black, so if you want to turn yourself away from towards the wall, away from the light, it might help a bit. Yeah, you're still with us. You're back now. So yeah, so I was just telling the guys about us setting up the distillery. So we set up the distillery. It's completely independent, and it's we set it up with very little funding and just dedication and an idea for what we wanted. So Liam, we're going to be dividing up the whiskey tasting tonight. First of all, we're going to be going and doing the bonded experimental series stuff, which is going to be very high quality, and then we're going to jump into our own distillate, and we're going to finish it off with stuff that's a little bit different as well, just for the crack, and also because there's a rum in there, and we're going to use it at the end because it's very powerful on your palate, and it might kill your palate the whole way through. It's not actually the best thing that we've got. It is very good, but it's better we use it at the end, otherwise it'll taint your palate for the rest of the whiskey tasting. Good to see Zoltan's in as well from Hungary. Thank God that you're still in Hungary, Zoltan, because you're a crazy guy. And only messing. So the first one we're going to go with is actually bottle number 14. So this is the bonded experimental series, and this is our next release. So you've just been involved in an exclusive tasting for the Pinot Noir cask. The Pinot Noir cask is going to be released. It's being labelled right now. So we're sticking the labels on it right now. And we've got, the labels are very important because we've actually got Newry and Mourne Council coming out to investigate our labels tomorrow, thanks to a complaint by the Irish Whisky Association that they didn't have the decency to come to us directly. So they went to the Department of Agriculture, who used European law to influence the local authority in this jurisdiction to get us to remove some of the integrity messages that we have in the back of our bottle, primarily the use of the word 2008, because they think we're trying to mislead the consumer and convince people that our whiskey is older than 10 years old, even though it clearly states in the front of the bottle that it's 10-year-old. It says it in massive writing that it's 10-year-old. But because we, in tiny print at the back, let the consumers know what they're drinking with a little bit of transparency, that's frowned upon by the powers that be, unfortunately, because woe betide anybody who wants to lead by example and give the consumer what they want and what they deserve as well. So, rant over.
There's a few guys there, Brendan, have a bottle number 15 instead of a bottle number 14.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
We weren't graced with one of these packages, unfortunately, because well, there was a shortage in stock, I think, and we just gave as much liquid as we possibly could. And so somebody's just sent me an image, which is great. No, that's a different image. If one of the guys in Belfast Whisky Club wants to send me a little text message, post it into the group, and we can see what the Killowen tasting is, and then that way.
I think I have it here. The 14 is Pinot Noir, but 15 is maybe from another tasting that's ended up in this back. bit of a guessing game. They'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Okay. No bother. So this here is the same as usual. So the guys in Great Northern Distillery were very good in supplying us with some stock that was aged in Cooley beforehand, and we've got it's made from a composition of malt and grain. So there's two malts and one grain, and blending. We think blending used to get sometimes blended whiskies get a bad rap, but when you get a good blend, it's a skill set in itself, and we were trying to make the best blends in Ireland in the meantime, because we've seen that as a challenge. We thought it would be easy enough to get really high-end malt and release it when we got our hands on it, but malt, really good malt, is also quite difficult to get. So we made these fantastic blends. So the blend ratios again are on the back of the bottle. So hopefully you can read that. So what we've got here is like 80% of this blend is a blend in itself, and a Great Northern, which is a beautiful blend, and fair play to them. The youngest drop being 10-year-old. So it was 10-year-old and an 11-year-old mixed together. And we also got some County Antrim malt and put it in there as well. And we were able to buy that, I think, through the fourth hand market through Acklandville Distillery, which was very kind of them. And because the big guys don't obviously sell to small fry like us. So, but we do the very best with what we had, and we thought this blend was powerful, and it worked very well. And we decided to use it across a range of casks, hence the Bonded Experimental Series. Our previous casks proved very successful, and we tried to juxtapose the flavors every time. You know, we tried to go for a dry note, a sweet note, and a stringent note. We went with the peated cask from. Well, we got in trouble for that as well, so I can't say where it came from. So that peated cask had a lot of old wood notes in there too, a lot of dry flavors, which was great. And this time we're going for a much more floral one. And this Pinot Noir Burgundy cask was a bit troublesome, to be honest. We put it in, and it overpowered itself very quickly and ruined the whiskey, we felt, because the high grain content can be quite aggressive and really attack the tannin in the wood. And we also had people who provided us with these casks wouldn't take our advice and give us a heavy char. They give us a light toast, which is good for the wine industry, but not good for ourselves. And so instead of it reacting with char, it was reacting with heavy tannin that was freshly grilled out of the wood. But we left it and let it mellow in a nice bourbon cask again for a while, and it pared back those flavors and created what we think now is a very well-rounded whiskey that's ready for market. And it's just been ready there the other day. So yeah, the Pinot Noir there, I'm very happy with it. Again, you do get those sort of fruity notes, those apricots, and you get a little bit of skittle in the end there, and the likes of apples and red fruit. When we first done it, you get a heap of strawberries, and it was just far too much. It was like a dessert wine that was gone wrong. But now it's much more rounded and it's come back. Have you any thoughts on it yourself there, Liam?
Yeah, I'm really liking the fruit in it. There's obviously a heavy vanilla and bourbon influence too, but the Pinot Noir is kind of in there in the middle. And as you say, like at the start, it was even the color was almost bright red, and it's pared back. The flavors pared back along with that. So the strawberry has turned more to a darker fruit, which is done well. So yeah, it took a lot of work, this cask, and I think you've done a good job to rescue it in some respects, but probably we're maybe being a bit too hard on ourselves. Not rescue, but just to round it out again, and it's come across lovely now. So I think people who have tasted it so far are really liking it because of the fruitiness and that little bit of skittle bomb at the end too.
It's amazing that a lot of the casks that when you start playing with them, especially when it comes to finish, things can get overdone, and then you can always rely on pulling things back a bit. So it's a matter of taking things out when the time's just right, and to date we've just done that. But yeah, this was just a matter of paring those notes back, and it's lovely, sweet, light, floral one. So, any thoughts then on 9? Anybody get any ideas what they're tasting? Paul Service. Paul Service is one for a good round.
So I think the success of does it sound okay?
Mm-hmm.
The success of the bonded experimental series, we're talking about previously about casks, modern day casks being you have an exotic range there and stuff, but I think the bonded experimental series has done well because they are really good casks, but the order in which we've brought them out, which isn't predetermined, it has to flow by when the whiskies are ready at a certain time. But it's good that the 4 releases so far have been all quite different from each other and swinging in different directions. So, this coming out now after the peated cask, it's totally going the other direction as well. It's more of a fruity whiskey, a wine cask versus, an old Islay peated cask. And, it's going back to maybe the Chocolina wine cask with the Acacia Edge. It's good to see a different wine, so Chocolina being the light, white sparkling wine from the Basque Country, and this being I suppose a light red, but from Burgundy, it's quite a strong wine, or strong wine influence from the cask. So yeah, the experimental series it kind of is that in the sense that all the casks are quite different from each other.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So we're going to have Wayne Salone joining us here as well. Once you leave, Liam.
No, that's great because I do have to bounce out.
Yeah, no bother at all. So the second one then that we're going to jump onto is it's going to be the stout cask. So this again is you're getting a look into the future. So after we release this Pinot Noir, we're going to be releasing this stout cask. So this stout is an imperial oatmeal stout and a very quality cask. But the sample that you have, we feel again has gone in a completely different move. It's gone much drier, if you know what I mean. So, so we've moved in that direction, but at the same time, it's about juxtaposition too. So it's about just we want a completely different change, and just the influence that the casks can have in that same blend. And then finally, we're going to jump on to cask later on that we're not going to talk about just yet. It was in one of the other tastings. But the sample that we have and the sample that you have of the stout is actually quite different. Ours, again, is a lot more dry and much more astringency to it. Liam, do you want to chat about the stout that was used for the stout cask?
Yeah, so I could grab a bottle here just to show people. 2 seconds.
So if I'm not wrong, everybody, I think this is bottle 18. It says 18 on our little scorecard anyway, so maybe think about it. This is actually, this is more in tune to my own palate. I like more dry flavors. I think we've come to the assumption and the expectation that Irish whiskey has to be sour and fruity all the time. It certainly doesn't, and sometimes if you can get, a more meaty dry whiskey, it's brilliant.
Yeah, so this is the beer, the Imperial Oatmeal Stout. So it's brewed by Moore Mountains Brewery, which is in Warren Point. It's only about 5 mile, if even 4 mile from the distillery. They used ex-Teeling. Well, the barrel came from Teeling, but it held 12-year-old single malt, so probably really, and previously a bourbon. So an old enough cask, but it had a high ABV stout in it, so double or an Imperial Oatmeal Stout. And the beer was probably in the wood for 10 months. Then it was degorged, I think November last year, and we took it straight away, basically the next day, up to Killowen to be filled. And so we're now 9 months. Yeah, 9 months in the barrel that held the beer. So I managed to hold 10 bottles of this and plan to do something with it. I've probably drank about 4 of them, which they're really tasty. It's a good beer, a barrel-aged Imperial Oatmeal Stout, but I think it ties in well that the type of stout having oats in it, kind of has a good connection instead of just a dry stout. Us being sort of fans of the oats too. It actually was a 14-year-old single malt that was in it, so we'll notice that this whiskey is now quite a dry finish, Brendan. And do you think it's from the older wood in the cask as opposed to the stout, and then the chocolate and coffee are kind of overtones to the woodiness?
Definitely, you're getting those drier notes, and the chocolate is coming through there, and definitely coffee too. We thought if we were going to have a stout finished cask, you might as well have a stout that's on steroids, and this is bloody it. It's full on, it's full of flavour, and it's got a lot of dryness in there, and that astringency coming from an old cask, the same as our peated cask that we released. There's a lot of old wood flavour in there, which almost balances out that sweetness. And when you're using a grain as powerful as this grain, they can be very aromatic, and you're relying heavily on those oils that are coming out of the single malt to balance it out. But when you're using that County Antrim famous single malt and it's full of those apricots, you're just getting a fruit bomb all the time. And for us to balance it out with this great, when we added the last one to wine, it just simulated it into a different. It increased it massively, and this one just tones that back a bit. So I know what way I like this. I like this with a drop of water, definitely, but I'm going to try it without it first. Lovely stuff. It's absolutely full of oils, and it is a lot drier, but you're still getting those fruity notes. You're still getting those orchard fruits, but I'm going to add a couple of little teaspoons of water. Probably in total about 1 teaspoon, 2 half teaspoons there. And already it's starting to open it up, and you're getting, well, I'm getting chocolate straight away, and cocoa bean, raw cocoa, more than drinking chocolate, and a lot of wood spice, even a little bit of ginger in there.
Yeah, it's prickly and on the tongue, and peppery.
It is indeed. So that compared to the last one. But if you look at all of our bottles, they have those quintessential Killowen signature now that's come to pass with the, there's bits of char floating around inside them. I don't know if that made to yourselves, because we give it in bulk over to the guys, the bottlers in Belfast Whisky Weekend. Aside from the wine casks, they all tend to have nice bits of char floating around inside. So just give the cask a good stir, and then fill the bottles directly from the cask, and that's what you get is what you drink. If you want to filter it yourself, you can. But
yeah, I think it was
do that free of charge. So
was it yesterday or maybe the day before? Seeing somebody put up on Facebook, I've got these black bits in my bottle. Is that possibly some wax or whatever fell into the bottle? And a good few people were able to jump in and say, no, that's the cask, that's the char from the cask that Killowen give you for free. Good man, Wayne. How you going?
Hello.
Where'd Brendan go on us?
Not too bad. Can you hear me okay, yeah?
Can indeed.
Don't know. My internet's messed about a bit, so hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah, no worries. Have you got the Imperial Oatmeal Stout cask finished there?
Yeah. I actually had this from another pack. This is the first whiskey of the day I've been at. Just in.
Good man.
I love this here, the stout cast. So I was up, we were pouring these out with up in Eckmanville, and the nose on this it's definitely for a stout cash. It's pretty sweet on the nose. It's really good.
Yeah, the sweetness develops after the dryness. You get more like burnt sugars as well.
Lovely. It's hard to say this. Any of the stuff. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Brennan must have cut out today.
It's yeah. The computer said to me, "You're." Oh, let's try this now.
There he's out.
Yeah. Very good. You can hear me all right, though, can you?
Yeah.
Is it mad?
I think I was talking to myself there.
Probably just
Here, boys, I'll
Yeah.
head out and let you have a conversation there. Good to join you,
Good
but
man. No bother at all.
I have to go and collect the
Enjoy
child.
yourself. Good lad.
All right,
No bother
boys.
at all.
Talk to you later.
Sound
Good man.
Sounds.
See you
So
Saturday.
it's a good job that we've got Wayne Sloan in, because Wayne's actually been following Killowen very closely from the beginning, and he was at some of the new make tastings as well that we had locally. He's also come up to the distillery a few times and visited us, so he knows what the Killowen ethos is about, and he also knows the flavours. And he's a converter. He believes fully in the nonsense of the current GA, unfortunately, and the corruption of it, which is probably inevitable. Um, you know, well, we're not going on that rant again. There's a few people giving out to me here, but yeah. So we were just talking about these two releases of the Bonner Experimental series. So you've gone for fruity, and then you get on to the more dry notes here with the stout cask. Whenever you open this up, you get those coffees. When you open it up with a bit of water, and also when you let it sit for a while in the glass and you allow it to breathe, it certainly opens up, and it's a different sort of complexity completely. And it just shows you the influences that casks can have in less than a year. So a beautiful stout and a really nice influence in the cask.
Did I miss Brendan there at the start? Did Liam show the stout that it was the cask was seasonal?
He did indeed. Hoops and Staves by Mourne Mountains.
Very
Lovely
good.
beer. It would be my favourite one of their beers. It's great stuff.
It's great the way that you are collaborating, with local Mourne companies as well, which is a great thing. Bringing everybody around, up and coming, and it's really great to see. And it's what Mourne's all about as well. All the new, there's a lot of new things happening in Mourne, and around this in County Down as a whole. It's massive what's coming. So it's good we're all there to support one another and just good products.
So Visit Mourne as an area is really started to open up, and that's what I was doing most of today. I was actually hosting meetings with Tourism NI. So at 10 meetings yesterday and 10 today, 15-minute slots. And there's this whole Visit Mourne area. There's about 20 companies working on that right now. It's just a pity that COVID had to happen and jump in and ruin everything. But so the next whiskey we're going to jump on to, okay, is another whiskey that we've laid down ourselves. It's not our own liquid, and we bought it ourselves. And again, this is a single malt, so we're going to go for bottle number 1. Or did we use one before? No, didn't. So yeah, number 1. Lovely stuff. Bottle number 1 is a port cask. So we got a beautiful port cask from Neffin Cooperage, and we'll release more details about the cask when this is released itself. So what we're going to do is release this, we think, around January time, and probably late at the end of January, whenever people are able to buy stuff after Christmas. And it's a lovely whiskey. So this is entirely 2008 County Antrim single malt, and it has those famous lovely fruity notes, but whenever you compile it with the port, it makes a huge difference. Now, if you hold this bottle up and you look inside it, what you can see in there isn't actually char. It's not char. It's sediment. Hello. Can somebody just give me a wee message to say if they can hear me? Okay. All okay, right? So I think Wayne's camera got a bit slow there. Thought I could hear Robot talking for a while. Maybe it's slow. So if somebody wants to jump in for the crack, from any of the admin or any of the Belfast Whisky Club wants to jump in, Jane or anybody, please do. So I'll hold this up again, and you can see it's actually sediment that's in this, and the sediment's coming out of the cask, and you're basically getting sediment from the berries, and that's what's in that cask. We tried to wash a load of it out, and then we turned around and said, this isn't coming out, and we don't want to just completely ruin the cask. So we weren't going to risk filling up the cask again with 40-degree water and rinsing it again. So we just left it in, and a lot of it's making its way into the whiskey. So we might just filter this, put this one straight into the bottle like it is as well. So basically, you're drinking what's almost a 12-year-old County Antrim single malt, and aged in a port cask. On the nose, it's automatically like a Skittles, or a Skittle bomb or something. It's absolutely lovely. Wayne, are you back with us, man? Yep, you are indeed. Good to see you. Now that I'm tasting that, there's actually a nice, tiny, like briny, salty note at the end of that as well. There for a while, no, it was in the middle of it, which is great. Maybe it's not in yours because it wasn't in this the last time I sampled it. I pulled this out of the cask today, and it's slightly different. Which is, you get a lot of, even a bit of like toffee in there too. Matthew Morrison basically said that there was a robot there for a couple of seconds. So this is Matt's chatting in us the whole way from the States. So it's great to have people around the world. We've got Zoltan in Hungary, Matt in the States. Anybody else there from overseas? Obviously, we've got our good regulars. A lot of familiar faces here from around the country at home. And Donald McGlynn is in, our famous Sligonian. Also the co-owner of Two Stacks Whiskey. Good man, Donald. So if anybody wants to throw in, Sean's getting a bit of Skittles, Percy Pigs. Percy Pigs. Sean, you've obviously got a child. You're feeding them Percy Pigs too. You wouldn't be eating those yourself, would you? So Peter, I'll have to confirm that again. The name of the place where the port came from, but I'll put it up in the Killowen cult later on today. I'll text the guys in Niffin, Cooperage, and they're the ones who supplied us with the cask. But it's gone from my head now. A lot of casks in there, so. The reality of this liquid is it's good to go. It really is good to go. But what I think we should do with this is sit on it just to see what happens, because with this experimental series, it's not about releasing stuff when it's ready. This isn't actually going to be part of the experimental series. This is going to be something new. We don't know what it's going to be yet. But for us, it's about pushing the boundaries and almost correcting things after they happen as well. So what we're considering doing with this, and I would love to get some feedback from people in this place. What would you think if this would put into an ex-peated cask, maybe a peated cask from an Irish peated cask from Great Northern, for example, or we would have a peated port, So one of my favorite whiskies would be Killowen port finish. So if anybody wants to try it and give me a bit of advice, let me know.
Can you hear me, Brendan? No.
Yeah, that's you loud and clear now, Wayne. You were doing a RoboCop impression for a while. And then,
yeah, the internet. My internet's through EE and it's just down, so I'm using the phone to try and log in, which is terrible. But that's fantastic. That whiskey now. That.
Very good. Garth just said he doesn't even have this sample, but he wants it in his life. Unfortunately, anybody who bought any of the two previous Killowen tastings wasn't allowed to take part in this tasting. And we felt bad that there was a demand the first time. So we released the second one. And unfortunately, there was people still complaining they didn't get the second one. So we released this one. So we released something a bit different, special. And there's a lot more Killowen distillate in this package than there is in the next. So we're not going to waste too much time because we have to go through bloody 9 whiskies. So where are we now? What time's this over at? Somebody will let me know, any of the admin. Do I get 15 minutes off Winon's time as well? So, lovely stuff. I really enjoy that. And it's actually, mine was in the cask probably a month more than yours. And it's gotten a lot drier. And it's bloody weird, but it's still fantastic. Loving it.
It's not as dry. This one isn't as dry, so that must have happened in there.
I did.
In that month.
Yeah. It happened this past month, So Rob gave it a 6. I think he probably doesn't like the whiskey that comes from that distillery, but for me personally, I think when whiskey that comes from that distillery, when it's done right, is a cracker. Oh right, sorry Rob, you're telling me it's a 6 p.m. Right, okay. Well that's good. We got an hour and 10 minutes. Plus the extra 15 minutes that we're going to steal for the crack. So that's the Killowen Bonded experimental series, and a little sneak peek into something that's being released in the future. So I think there's only about 15 in this group, and so we're allowed to talk about this. Actually, this is being recorded as well, isn't it? Shit. Right. So I'm not allowed to call out any more corruption in the Irish whiskey industry then, in case I get shouted at. Right. So, right, we are going to move on to the next stage, and I think a good place to start is probably with Killowen Poaching. So it's number 11, bottle number 11, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's bottle number 11. So the nice thing is these are 50 cl measures as well. So you should have got 50 cl or else somebody's going to get shouted at. But have a little taste of it as well, and save some for later. And Louise is in for the crack. Louise has been a good supporter of us for a long time. She's got a very good palate for whiskey, and she missed out. She missed out because she was in her other tasting. But everything from Killowen is normally cask strength or above. So everybody in the last tasting was bloody sideways by the end of it. So
the measures are fantastic. I poured them out, and pouring them into the bottle, like a 50 ml measure. I'm taking 3, maybe 4 goes at the wee bottles. They're fantastic for going back on.
Fantastic, yeah. Oh, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. So what we've got here then is the poaching. Now, this is something we're really passionate about, and I honestly think that if we had to call this new make spirit or unaged whiskey, well, we wouldn't be allowed to call it that, but I think it would fly. I think it would absolutely fly out. But obviously people are a bit afraid sometimes to try new things, and a lot of people are a bit snobby as well. But this is a spirit to me. I think it's exceptional for what Killowen are doing, and it is young. It tastes young, but it doesn't taste like a new make spirit. It tastes like an aged spirit. There's a lot of apple in there, of course, but it's apple that's coming from the it's coming from the spice. It's coming from the grain. It's not coming from the as if there's poor cuts or else like it's a young whiskey or anything. So it's lovely and it's full of spice. It's like, so when we were younger, mother used to make some like lovely desserts, and you take the core out of an apple and fill it full of mince, fruit mince, and then you would bake it in the oven, and it's that sort of a flavour. But so you get that, and at the same time you get a load of clove, and then your castor sugar and the tree sap. And this is all in the nose. I haven't even started drinking the bloody thing yet. And there's a hint of vanilla as well.
They're getting all that. That's fantastic.
Pine needles as well. We're made of stuff.
Shortbread, and I just, when I first noticed that, there was something in my head, and that's exactly what I'm getting, is shortbread. That's spot on for me anyway.
Fine shortbread, yeah.
Yeah, you just get that mild vanilla notes along with the sweetness.
Vanilla. And normally you get vanilla from the cask, but this is full of vanilla, but the vanilla's come from the grain. So for us, this is about mash bills. This is mash bill culture. And this isn't a massive mash bill. This is the pared back mash bill, because the next time we release poaching, we're going to release a heavy, oatened, herded style poaching. This was a delicate style poaching that we were releasing for the masses to try and bring them into the fold. But now we're just going to realize, fuck it, people are going to want to drink Killowen, and we're going to make a massive statement with our next poaching. And this is, for me, this is quality. So I'm going to talk about the mash bill of this. What have I got a bottle here somewhere? Never far from a bottle of the poaching. So we put the mash bill in the back of this bottle. I don't know if you can read it or is it backwards because of the cameras, but it says there's malted barley, unmalted barley, Maris Otter malt, oat, and wheat. And the percentages are there as well. So basically giving people a recipe on how to make pot still. In fact, if we were to put this in a cask, it would be compliant pot still. But we didn't realize that when we were making it. We were just toying around with all our different mash bills, and we thought, you know what, this is a good one for the market. And we made a couple of batches of it, and It's got a good following, and people are buying it up well, and it's so versatile when you use it as well. We don't mind people using it in cocktails, and in fact, it makes the best old fashioned or fracking Irish coffee. We call it a Killowen coffee, and only use half a shot, by the way. Maybe a bit of nutmeg or else a bit of cinnamon or something on top of it. So a little bit of whatever it is, brown spice or ginger or something, just try it, and they all complement, because that's what pot still spice is. Pot still spice is with those brown spices. So yeah, great stuff. It's only got 2% oat, but it's still full of oil. But a really good component of this is malted barley that is called Maris Otter. So Maris Otter is a heritage style grain. It comes from England because there were no heritage style barleys grown in Ireland at the time. Now there's Hunter barley, which is going to be made commercially available this year. So we're going to get in touch with the growers of it and buy some and replace that mash bill with Hunter barley, which basically tastes very similar. So those heritage grains actually pack much more flavour than our more modern grains, because we've refined agriculture to such an extent to get more grain sitting on top of a stalk of grass, but at the expense of flavour. But grains of old used to have thicker husk, and there was less of them, and they're much more hardy. But see, grains of new, because of efficiency and because of human production, how put it as our own testament as human beings and efficiency in agriculture, we've reduced the thickness of the skin, we've increased the size of the berry, and we've much more berries per plant. So most it's like anything you eat, a lot of the flavors usually are towards the skin of the grain. So this is a real favorite of mine, and full of pepper, full of power, and full of spice. But it's a really good introduction to what Killowen's about and to what our spirit's about. So we're going to move on to some even more interesting stuff now. Remember, Wayne, at the Killowen New Make Spirit tasting, we could have done that in Dublin, or we could have done it in Belfast. And we are going to do this with Belfast Whisky Club. And we'll do a tour around Ireland as well to all of the different whisky clubs and whisky societies if they'll have us, and we'll let them taste our spirit. But it was important for me to do it in Warrenpoint. And even though we didn't have huge numbers, it was just a testament to the area and a nod to locality. So
that was I was talking to my dad there. He was with it. And it was great night's crack. It was the first time I tried any. It was the first night I met you, and it was a fantastic event, and it was very intimate. You were taking a lot of time speaking to all the the people that was there, and the measures were good. There was good measures poured, so it was good crack by the end of the night. But definitely, I walked away there a total fan, and I haven't looked back, and I've been torturing you ever since.
It was good, because we had turned up, and there was different people turned up to the event. There was some young fellas there, and they'd never really drank much whiskey before. And then we got these hardy fishermen from Kilkeel, yourself and your father and your brother-in-law, who are well used to drinking strong spirits when they're out deep sea fishing. But it was great to have you, And so we're going to go on to next. Sorry, we're going to go on to bottle number 2. Now, bottle number 2. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's called GI pot still, 60%. So this will be GI compliant pot still, and it is at 60%. And it's important we try this first. There's not a world of difference between this pot still and the potching you've previously tasted. So why we're calling this GI, because it's compliant with the GI. And we're just going to go, I'm not going on a rant here, but just in case people here aren't aware, I know most of us are, because it's basically the main doctrine of the Killowen ethos. Killowen was set up to make authentic pot still, not a watered down, corrupted mash bill that we have today, and it's protected by EU law, unfortunately. So the pot stills we have today were put in place, which is fantastic. But for much longer, we were making pot still in a different way, and there was oats and there was rye and there was wheat in there. And it was 30% oats, rye, and wheat. In fact, I've got a bloody mash bill right now. So this mash bill here is from Bandon Distillery in County Cork, and it was taken from the Public Records Office. And if you look at the average line at the bottom, and at the top there it says malt, rye, barley, wheat. So malt means malted barley, and barley means unmalted barley. And if you look at the averages, it just so happens to work out. You can take a screenshot of this now if you want. It just so happens to work out that 30% was oats, rye, and wheat. And then there was 30% odd, which was malted barley, 33% odd was malted barley, and the rest of it was unmalted barley. And that's how we made pot still. Cumber was something similar. Maybe there was no rye in there, but there's a lot of oats in there. But this is what, and there was unmalted barley in there. So this is what pot still was. Pot still of today is amazing, yes, but it's only a snapshot of how good it can be. So we're trying to go back to what pot still was about when Irish whiskey was king, before Scotch even grew up. When Scotch was just still wearing nappies, Irish whiskey was king, and Irish whiskey was using broader mash bills. So back to what we're drinking now is pot still that is GI compliant. So this is 5% oats, rye, and wheat, and the rest is 30% unmalted barley then, and the rest is malted barley. Still smells lovely. It's been aging for around 6 months, I think, and God, it's great. It actually is lovely.
Yeah, it's been aged the color.
Yeah, and so this was actually in so this was a second filled bourbon cask. So this is a refill cask. So this held bourbon, and then it held just straight from bourbon. If I remember now correctly, sorry, it was straight first filled bourbon cask. So this held bourbon for at least 3 years over in the United States, and then is transported over to us. Nice cask. So most of these tend to come from the likes of Jack Daniels, but not always. So do take a nose and take a wee taste, but do not hesitate to add water. I always have a glass of water and a teaspoon at hand. There's even some 40% whiskies that you should add water to, but anything that comes from Killowen, try it with and without water, because it opens up the flavour. Especially this stuff. This is what percent? I haven't got the card with me, so I've got some notes here. So this is 60%. So yeah, definitely add water. So when you put alcohol in a cask, it loses 3% in its first year, and then every year thereafter it loses 2%. So that works out just about right. So we've lost 4% out of this cask now. So actually more than that. So it's aging far faster than we had thought, which is all right, because we put everything into our casks at 64%. It's absolutely delicious, in my opinion. I can. Good old dogs. So I'm actually very happy with that. That's lovely. So whenever we distill, one of the two main components of our I want to go back to the start here. We mash by hand. So we use both paddles and we stir our mixed mash bills together on site by hand. We draw off our wort, our sugar solution. We leave it outside and we let the wild bacteria, that native lactobacillus bacteria, to get in there and infect the fermentation, and it creates. If anybody's ever tasted a sour beer, a sour mash beer, that's what happens. Most of the sour mash beers you get today are false. They just put in some lactobacillus bacteria they buy out of a lab or out of a health food store. But for us, we let it get in there. We let it get funky, very funky, and then we add our yeast, and then we let it ferment. So it's fermenting, and every day we come in, we open it up. Sometimes we have to try to stop the wasps getting in, but if a wasp gets in now this week, it's fine. So you close it up overnight, and once it's fermented, then we seal it up. And we distill this stuff after about a week or so. So we let it ferment, and then we let it settle. So we ferment it and distill it, and we distill it in Ireland's only flame-fed stills. So we've got flame heating the base of our still. Flame is very important to us because flame creates what's known as the Maillard reaction. So it's when the amino acids and the sugars at the base of the still start to caramelize and create another layer of flavour. For me personally, it's the same as peated and non-peated. It's that distinctive. It adds another layer of flavour. So a distillery in Scotland that does it, for example, is Glenfarclas. Everybody remembers the infamous implosion of a still in Glenfarclas about 8 years ago. Heartbreaking stuff, and they had to wait for Forsyths to make them a new still. They obviously paid a bit of money and got jumped up the list, and Forsyths made them another beautiful still, and then they started to add the they started to heat their still, but unfortunately it was a steam still because Forsyths are like, no, we don't do flame fed stills anymore. It's absurd. And 3 years later, the whiskey was of age, and it was like, this isn't good enough. So they ripped out the steam apparatus, a whole lot of plant, a lot of kit, a lot of money, and they stuck back in the flames underneath. And their whiskey tastes good again. So Glenfarclas of old is much better than Glenfarclas of young. But then the brand new Glenfarclas that's coming of age now is better than the middle-aged stuff because of that. So that's how important flame-fed distillation is. So Wayne Sloan, his internet's gone. So look, we've got a lot of people in there who are interested in having the crack. If anybody wants to jump in, put your hand up. Matt Morrison wants to jump in, put your hand up. Matt Morrison sent me over a lovely bottle of bourbon, trying to convert me into the bourbon culture. So anybody at all, admin, get on the ball there. I've actually been whiskey reviewing here now for a few hours. I was in with Finan O'Connor twice during his extra long session, and I've been drinking whiskey all week, so I'm just about to keel over. So somebody needs to jump in for a bit of crack with me now as well. Okay, so lovely stuff. And so that's the flame fed component. Rant over. We are 12 hours in a still because we've got worm tub condensers as well. So if we were to use a shell and tube condenser, it would be twice as fast. The distillate would be coming through that condenser at twice the speed that it should be, because it creates a draw on the still. It's like a draft. If you open the door, the air rushes out through the door. But whenever you've got a worm tub condenser, it doesn't happen as fast. So the draw is slower. And when that's happening, those oils are being condensed into the spirit at a slower rate. It isn't happening at a flash, and it's gathering with it all of this flavour, and including some briny notes, which are fantastic. But so there's much more congeners that are and esters as well that are sitting inside that distillate, and it makes for a much more interesting spirit at the end. So unfortunately, nobody in Ireland is using worm tub condensers anymore, which is a crying shame. You ever see a big, beautiful worm tub condenser when you go down to Middleton and you do the old tour? I would love to see them using it again. I think their beautiful spirit would become even more beautiful if they did. And yeah, so for us, flame fed stills, worm tub condensers makes a much more a unique spirit. Well, it's not unique; it's probably more historically accurate, you know. So Matt Morrison's poor old app keeps crashing. So Matt's out. Somebody's going to jump in and rescue me here anyway, aren't they? Zoltan, if anybody knows him, he's a big girl's blouse from Hungary. Sometimes he drives his little sister's bicycle around the place as well. So if that doesn't entice you to jump on, Zoltan, I don't know what will. So yeah, I'm going to take one last gulp of this before we jump on to the next. But if anybody wants to tell us, is that Brian G? Is that Brian Green from Dublin? Brian Green. Or is it a different Brian G? So, Brian, please jump on. Do me a favour. Good man. So, it's full of pot still spice. You're getting a lot of that ginger, clove, a hell of a lot of clove. This spirit, no, we're very happy with it. But the reason why I put this spirit on now before the next one is because I want to show you the difference between a GI mash bill and a non-GI mash bill. It just so happens that our non-GI is also peated, but we'll get onto that in a second. So, anybody want to give me a couple of... please do hop on, Brian. It would be brilliant, because I had to rescue Finan, believe it or not, and then I had a tourism NI meeting. And then I rescued him again and had another tourism NI meeting. I'm trying to put more area on the map. And as a result, I haven't been to the bathroom or anything. So if somebody could just jump on for 2 minutes, it would be excellent. So the next one we're going to jump on to, and Brian is going to jump on now. And Brian can really join in this conversation because he's part of the Irish Whiskey Society, and he knows exactly what we're talking about with this mash bill. He's also done a huge amount of research into the topic. He made an Irish whiskey timeline, which was very effective when it was published in the Irish Whiskey magazine. And I consider him an expert in the matter. But Brian himself is probably very humble and wouldn't assume that title. But he's definitely a huge influencer in what we're doing, and he does a huge amount of work with the Irish Whiskey Society. He hosts these wonderful tastings as well. So Brian probably doesn't need an introduction to most of you, but for a lot of us up in Ulster here who don't venture down to the tastings in Dublin as much, you might not know Brian, but he's certainly, it's a privilege to have him on here with us. So that was the non-GI tasting. So the next one that was the GI tasting. So the next one we're going to go on to is the non-GI tasting. Okay. So where are we in my notes? Aging pot still non-GI. So I think that's bottle number 3. Is that right? It doesn't look like it. 3. Good man, Jason. Yeah, it smells like 3. The reason I think mine might be different. I'm not sure. I pulled this out of a cask today, and I hope it's the same stuff. This should be 3 months old in a sherry cask, but we'll see. So I'm going to dump a little plop in the glass. I'm going to pour a bit more of this in because I fucking love it, and you know, it's well deserved after the day we've had. And give it a nose. Lovely stuff.
Hey Brendan, how you doing?
Brian, it's a privilege to have you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to see you. Well, I'm on your Killowen bonded experimental box 1 because I only had half the sample of each. Though I was trying to be very
brilliant,
sort of smart this time. So are we doing one of the ones that you had on there, or is this a different one that you have?
We're going to go with basically what's sitting in the Irish Whiskey Society cask right now, except what you have is actually a much more impressive cask. Your PX compared to our PX was probably about 10 times better. So I don't know where you pulled that out of, but anyway.
It was kind of a very that's a little bit that was left at the bottom of the cask before we kind of knocked it out when we called up to the distillery. All right, so it was a very there we go, very dark colored liquid. But amazing, amazing, very enjoyable little drink of that now, I have to say as well, even with the little bits of wood in the bottom of it. But
indeed, it's absolutely fascinating stuff. So what we've done here, I just want to make sure what we've actually got here is that aged in a bourbon cask.
Oh, okay, very good.
Yours PX, because I didn't get the tasting pack, which I thought I was going to get. I assumed that I would get one. I didn't know I had to pour my own samples. But so the last time we done this in the last tasting, it was actually this sitting in a PX cask. But this is I haven't had this. This is the sample sitting in a bourbon cask. So can anybody else give me a wee nod? Is theirs the same color as mine, or is it really dark PXy color? I would love to know. But either way, Brian knows this inside out, and he can chat about it.
How long?
This is bourbon cask Pierce. Thank you.
In the bourbon cask for?
Pierce, our distiller. Pierce, our distiller, said that mine is a bourbon cask, but everybody else is light. Yeah. So, Brian, you can take it from here. This is the PX. It's meant to be PX, but mine's bourbon, which is beautiful as well.
So this is this the peated, like with some peated oats and everything in it? Yeah.
This is your mash bill. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
I'm going to sprint to the loo. All right.
Yeah. Go for it. You run off there. Yeah. So, well, thanks basically to Fiona O'Connor as well, who sort of had a look around at old mash bills. Again, talking a little bit about the technical file and the GI, so I don't want anyone rolling their eyes, but inside it, as I'm sure most people know, you can have a minimum of 30% unmalted barley, a minimum of 30% malted barley, and then a maximum of 5% of other grains. So this is much more than a maximum of 5% of other grains. Now, when Brendan was putting this together, he tells us how many bags of different grains went into the mash bill. So this would have include things like oats, and he's got some rye and a bit of wheat in here as well, as far as I can remember. So it's like it's to allow the different flavors and everything to come from the grains. So there's a very good thing called the whiskey flavor wheel, which I see in the corner of my eye on the other side of the room. So if anyone wants to look this up, this is probably one of the best. Hey, you got a cat. Well, listen, if my doggy sees that now, we'll be having shenanigans going on here now. But if anyone wants to go on, there's a thing called the Canadian Whiskey Flavor Wheel. And it's Fionn showed this to me one time at a tasting. And it's incredible. It's the first sort of wheel I ever saw. So it has things like yeast in 1/3, grain in 1/3, and wood in another third. And it just discusses the different types of flavors that you'll get from the grain. So this talks about wheat, barley, rye, corn, malt, and so because it's coming from Canada, so they'll be talking about corn a little bit more. But it just lets you know what flavors you might get from it, and then the actual chemical compounds that would be left remaining in it. So for that phrase of everyone saying it's all in the wood, well, it's it's all in the wood, it's also all in the grain, and it's also all in the yeast. So it helps a little bit when you're doing tastings, when you know what the mash bill might be, that if you're thinking of a flavor, it helps work back in that direction if anyone's interested in it. So just Brendan I just want to talk about the smoking part of it. I was out the back of the distillery where you have your smoking area. I don't know, what would you want to call, not a smoking area.
That's it, yeah.
For a cigarette,
the smokehouse.
Smokehouse, yeah.
So it's great. So we basically get there isn't a huge amount of accessible smoked oats in Ireland, and although when we do see them, we're not able to buy a pallet load at a time. They're made by these legends down the Midlands. But if we were to take them up to us, we're bloody small, But so what we do is we get our oats, and our oats are grown in the local area. There's a threshing festival every year, and they grow an acre of oats, and they basically harvest them and thresh them, and they have a festival to see who can get them bagged at the same time. So what we do is we get these oats and we malt them ourselves on site in a smoking house out the back. And Liam Brogan on just a second ago, his father's farm in Donegal is a turf farm, and we use that turf, and it's lovely floral heavy turf, and it's got the notes that it provides is just fantastic. The scents in that turf carries through into the barley, and it's lovely.
So that would be a bit more like a Orkney sort of peat then, so more sort of higher layer, heathery, so a Highland Parky style rather than a dark Isla style, yeah.
Exactly. You can break it in your hand, and you can still see the organic matter clear as day. It's great, and it's just amazing to be holding it. So you do feel guilty sometimes with burning organic matter and old turf and that, but it's cut sustainably. It's cut by hand in small quantities, and that is sustainable, in itself. So there's obviously a few issues. There's a massive debate about that right now. I'm not going to get into the whole Mary Robinson argument here, but you know what I'm saying.
Maybe if we go through the mash bill of the expression a little bit, and let you talk about a little bit what like the oats will bring to it, and just discussing about mashing these different types of grains, because I think that's a key part. Is when you're setting up a big production sort of distillery, you have your runs and your production runs and things like hammer mills or water mills to help you along the way, and then you've got machinery. But Killowen being completely different to all that, you have things like ores and other ways of doing things. So maybe discuss what each grain challenge it might bring for you.
Yeah, so the only machine we have on site, in fact, we've got two machines on site. One of them is called a roller mill, and it basically rolls it in a remedial manner, and we just turn it slightly. So with oats, for example, you need to open it a bit wider because it can clog up. Oats are very oily, and they'll clog up the machine, and they'll clog up our auger very quickly, so they fall down into the mash tun. We've hit on our barley. We just want to break barley. Barley just needs to break, and when it breaks, it shatters out and creates a hell of a lot of flour, huge amount of flour. But when we put our rye in, we've got a small amount of rye. The rye, basically, you need it much closer together. Rye is a hardy wee bugger, and it doesn't want to break. And it's a troublesome grain. We'll get on to rye later on, but right now we're going to talk about breaking it down. And we've also got a bit of wheat in there, which is somewhere between barley and rye. It's a bit more hardy, and it doesn't want to break down, but oat is just full of wax and oil and grain. The other machine that we have on site is a very unique, the other machine that we have on site, it's a very unique machine. It goes by the name of Pierce Carr. So what he does, he gets the ore, and he's fantastic at it. He mixes these things together, and he operates the machine and mixes together. And he's also a distiller as well, and he works. Me and Pierce work closely together, and he's taken to this. He's got a huge amount of knowledge in it now, and it's brilliant. But the only thing is, sometimes he breaks paddles, and it costs us a lot of money, and somehow he blames it on me. But this hands-on approach, this dedication from start to finish, is a huge amount of our doctrine as well, and we have to continue to do that. And it's just like buying a factory-made bun or taking a bun from your mummies or your grannies. Which is better, you know? That handmade one and the one that's going to be made in large batches. So the more attention to detail that you have, the better that it is, you know. And for us, putting this in a PX sherry cask is a perfect combo. Basically, sherry and peat go so well together. Sherry does not kill peat; it complements it. And peat gets in there, and that oiliness gets in there. And oats is so important because when we talk about oats, we talk about, say, for culinary terms, whenever you put oil for say in your food, when you're cooking with oil, the reason why you're using oil is to hold on to flavor. So you're putting spices and peppers and paprika or whatever in there. Oil holds on to that. You're making a stir fry without oil. What have you got? Nothing. So you need oil. If you use oats in your mash bill, you're putting oil into your mash bill. You're putting oil in there, and that acts as a vessel and carries on to all of that pot still spice. So that pot still spice that we tasted in the last run, although there's less of it now because we're replacing our other ingredients with oil, you're tasting it far more because the oil sits in your palate and holds on to those flavors in your palate for longer. So oats have their own flavor as well, which is very difficult to describe. You just have to bloody taste it. Peter Bignell's tasting at Belfast distillery in a few days' time. It'll explain what oat whiskey is. But oats, outside of their own small flavor profile, are about texture and about energy, but the flavor is there as well. But,
yeah, the mouthfeel of an oat distillate is very different, and it'll send it off in a different way. But I think marrying that PX sherry with it as well. So if anyone's had a chance to try sherries side by side, so if you get like an Oloroso and a Palo Cortado and say a PX side by side, they're very different, you know, expressions as well. Like the PX is I'm quite a fan of PX. It's a little sweeter and everything, but it's a lot more like the mouthfeel on it and the viscosity of it is always completely different as well. So I think marrying the oats and getting the peat and the PX together just sends it off in a very interesting way. And that only being like, it's about 6 months in the cask, I think. Is that right? That one?
Indeed, the one that you have, and this is also 6 month old, and this is a very rare one. I forgot we had this stuff because we normally just go for the PX casks with our peated, and but it's still got the same hot still spice. But my favorite is the one that you're drinking. It's an absolute, and you get that fig, that heavy fig, which is just layering and even more oils in there, and it's just so exciting. So different casks. Some of the casks we don't clean out as much as other casks. So all of the Killowen releases in the future are going to be different from each other. So
Richard Jones is just saying there, would you ever think about trying to replicate an old pot still mash bill, the likes of Old Comber? Well, you know,
I would love to, but I think we have too much respect for our neighbouring distilleries that may be looking into that type of research right now that we wouldn't want to intrude. Plus, for Killowen, although we're acknowledging history, we're not focusing for ourselves. We don't want to focus on nostalgia. We think that might be a bit contrary. So what we want to do is we're contemporary. We're a contemporary distillery. We haven't got the capacity to absorb an old brand, so we're going to basically do our own brand. And the people who are looking at Old Comber Mash Bill are brilliant, and they're the best people to do the job. And that's all we're going to say.
Yeah, Wayne's making a good point about the color. Yeah, for 6 months in the cask, it's incredible. You know what I mean? It's just so dark and rich and everything.
Like you see 3-year-old whiskies this color as well. You just do. But your whiskey has got much more rubiness and much more darkness to it, and a fig in it because it's put in a sherry cask. And you're tasting that because that's where Killowen's going. That's going to be the Killowen core going down the road. And what you're tasting now is a bit of history as well. This is what old pot still used to be like, I think. It used to be full-bodied. It was flavoursome. It was bold. It was complex. Irish whiskey, in order to survive over the last few decades, rebranded itself as with 3 bullshit terms like non-peated, triple distilled, and smooth, which is probably the biggest insulting word of all. Irish whiskey was bold. It was complex. It was full-bodied. You could chew it.
Oily, exactly.
Oily. Rather, exactly. And I didn't even realize, but the way the pre-1970s pot still tasting last night, we were drinking whiskeys the last couple of days. It was an expensive tasting to be a part of, but we were drinking whiskeys that were, that are probably around $5,000 a bottle. These old Irish pot stills that taste nothing like the pot stills of today. And Finn O'Connor, put a huge amount of effort into presenting it, and it was absolutely baffling and so enjoyable to listen to it. And everything he said was full of truth. And what we're drinking today is not actually, it's pot still. It's beautiful, but it's only a snapshot of how good pot still can be. And it certainly isn't pot still of old. So what we're doing at Killowen is creating pot still of old. The only issue is we're not allowed to call it pot still once it's released.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the earlier on a little bit, because I had to do write something up one time for the Irish Whiskey magazine on it. So it's interesting. Like, it goes. Like, I was looking back through the archives and the records of the Dáil and everything about, like, when was the word pot still ever mentioned, like, legally and everything, you know? So you had the Spirits Act of 1880, which tried to put a bit of a framework on the whole idea of what is, but I tried to define whiskey, and mostly is, you know, all about something to do with taxation. It's always to do with tax or government or like regulation. So that's why these things get put into an act. But the Whiskey Act of 1950 was interesting. It just talks about you know, spirits described as Irish pot still whiskey obtained by distillation solely in pot stills in the state from a mash of cereal grains such as those ordinarily grown in the state. So that was talking about grains grown in Ireland. So at that point in the 1950s, it had to be grains that are grown ordinarily in Ireland. So whatever grains we could grow here, and no mention about ratios or percentages or anything. Then you go on to the Whiskey Act of 1980. Yeah, and the Whiskey Act of 1980 is saying, you know, I've decided to omit reference to Irish pot still in the Irish Whiskey Bill of 1980, and that was because no one thought Irish pot still was going to be a category anymore in the 80s, which is, like, you know, quite a scary thought. And again, it just keeps that thing about it being a, you know, a mash of cereals. You know, they were in with or without natural diastasis, so things to kick the fermentation process on. Going up to 1989, pot still came back in, and then we start getting into the EEC and the European Commission. But there's that, and then you can go start looking on the EEC website for all the regulations. But just interesting, back in the 50s, you know, they were approached to go from the, you know, Irish Pot Still Distillers Association saying, oh, here, we need to have pot still defined. So they started to disappear in the 80s and then swung back around again. And then we are where we are now on technical files and everything. So anyway, very interesting to taste something with all of those grains in it. So well done, and a lot of hard work and a lot of fitness.
But if you want to stay for the crack, Brian, please do.
No worries. Yeah, well, we'll see.
Unless anybody wants to jump in for the crack, because it's, as Phil was saying earlier, it's strange when you're talking to yourself, even though you might have a few people who might be enthusiastic, your brain automatically assumes that they're not, because there's no banter back and forth. But it's good to have your knowledge is just superb, you know, and you're always an extension as well to all of the people around you, you know, like Charlie Roach and etc. So we really take our hat off to you guys, and we really appreciate it. And I'm not going to accept myself as a pioneer in the industry. I have to fully give credit to, you know, to where our influence came from, and it did come from you guys and that small circle of dedication that there is.
Well, yeah, so Charlie's fantastic. If you ever follow him on Twitter, always great to see old advertisements and also new advertisements. He's always the first person to see what's coming up out in the TVB over in the States. Someone was asking about the pot still GIs and or the GIs and who do you talk to and everything. I mean, the latest legislation, it sort of transitioned back in July of last year into a new regulation, and inside that there's actually a section in it that sort of talks a little bit about where it's going next, and it does say that basically, you know, you can get Article 31 details that any group having legitimate interest may apply for approval of an amendment to a product specification. So technical files are now going to be called product specifications. So any group having a legitimate interest, which means, you know, any group as in producers or people worked in the, so there's groups can form themselves and become a lobbying group. There's not necessarily any one lobbying group in the whole island of Ireland who would, it's the Department of Agriculture that has to listen to these various groups. So some people group together.
Brilliant. No, you're dead right. You're dead right. You're dead right. Most of the influence on the legal system comes from the Irish Whiskey Association. They're a semi-public body that anything they say, unfortunately, the Department of Agriculture will take as they would have respect for what they say, basically.
Yeah, they framed the original file so back originally there wasn't really any. I mean, the GI is very important to protect the term and everything. So, but it's just people need to see how the legislation is written, and you go to a lot of tastings and presentations sometimes, and the technical file is mentioned, but actually reading it is a slightly different matter. I mean, it's about 17 pages, so it's not that long a read, but it's worthwhile actually just having a flick through it so that people know. I mean, there's some very interesting parts of it that go through the history of Irish whiskey. Some bits of it written well, other bits written a little bit more like a book, but it's important to see how the legislation is framed on a European level, because we're granted the GI on a European level. So rather than going from one area here in Ireland and looking up, if you go the other way around and look down from, well, how is it registered up in Europe, that unlocks how the GI actually works, and that's probably a good approach to go through.
Can I have everybody just write a one-word answer in response to this question? Okay, so the Irish whiskey law right now says that we're not allowed to call what you've just drank in 2 years' time as you're not allowed to call that a whiskey. Okay, so you're not allowed to call it pot still whiskey, but you're allowed to call it whiskey, or you can call it a blend. Imagine calling it a blend. So do you agree with that? Yes, or do you agree with that? No. Just let me see a few answers here, and just we want to see, because you can disagree. Feel free to disagree, and a lot of people are saying there, thanks very much, and well said, Brian. Brian's knowledge and his contribution to this area of thought, this crucial turning point in Irish whiskey history, revival in Irish whiskey history, is massive, and people need to appreciate that. So we're going to move on to our next one. We were talking about.
I'm going to hop out. because the little doggie's here wagging its tail, looking for attention. So I'm looking after for the day. Exactly. I know, yeah. But yeah, so that's it. Just the files are there. They're all online. The legislation is all online, and it's about people working together to try and go into the debate to see where it might go next. That's the way I approach things. Always conversation and engagement. So anyway, enjoy the rest of the sips.
With full respect, yeah, definitely. So I'm going to get somebody else. Thanks a million, Brian. You're an absolute gentleman.
See you.
So very good. So we're going to get somebody else maybe to jump in soon. But in the meantime, what we were just talking about in terms of Irish whiskey mash bills, there's a grain that's been grown in Ireland from the Middle Ages. So from the 1500s, we were growing rye in Ireland. Rye is a very strange grain. It's become very popular now with the recent rise in alternative culture and hipster culture, whatever you want to call it, whenever we stop being so inward looking. And we're making things like rye breads, and that's from most of our influence. Most of our first impressions of rye came, but Ireland was a grower of rye, and rye, it's been difficult to grow. We grew it because we had it, but it's actually better grown in cold, dry countries. It's grown very well in Tasmania, in the New World, for example, but it's grown in Eastern Europe. They grow it very well. Rye is a cracking grain. It's a spice bomb. Whenever you make something, it's like menthol and ginger and pepper all mixed together, and very minty. Like mint sauce you would put in lamb. So rye is an awesome grain, but when you try to distill or even mash with it, it is an absolute pain in the backside. So Finan was talking earlier about this method in Ireland, how they used to grow rye. They used to mix it with both wheat and rye and scatter it over a field with your hand and let it grow. And that's he didn't understand why, but as a distiller and brewer, then as part of that trade, I can understand why. It's because it's useless on its own. It doesn't break up. It's too tight. So we started off making rye whiskey, and we went for 100% rye single malt. So when it's dried out, so when they would have had it in their granaries for a while, it's fine using it when it's wet. That's called green. But see, when it's dry, you cannot use it because you can't mill it. But if you do mill it, you can't mash it and distill it or bake with it very well. It becomes difficult. So when you put it, and beer was very important to the early people, the early nations, because water a lot of the time is unsafe to drink. Even the Irish people, we didn't drink water. We drank nothing but buttermilk, especially in the cold seasons. But that's another discussion that you can talk to Finan O'Connor about. So we were reported to have the best waters in Europe, but we never actually drank them. This is from the Spanish Crusaders. So we're going to talk about rye whiskey. So we made 100% rye, and Pierce Carr broke about 6 paddles, and he was an awful temper about it, because rye drinks water and doesn't increase in size. And when suspended in water, it doesn't become buoyant. It actually clumps together like glue, and I mean glue, hard glue, yoo-hoo glue, paste, stuff that does not want to mix with water at all. And you can try and try and try, and you can scrape it off the base, and it cakes in like glue, and it doesn't want to move. It's like tar. That's the best texture of it. How you going now? Felt good to see you.
How is it going, Graham?
For the job.
I thought that, unfortunately, you're drawing the short straw that it's made that you have to have banter with,
I am delighted to see you. We have two heroes of the industry, Brian and now yourself. So, yeah, it's great to see you. Good morning.
Well, here, Brendan, you're saying about rye. You're saying about rye being really sticky, right? Comparatively, what's it like compared to oats? Because, I mean, that was one of the things I remember that Graham Miller had said whenever they had tried to use oats in their mash bill, that, I mean, it was like really thick and sticky as well.
It's sticky. It is sticky, but it doesn't compare. It does not compare. We like using oats. Oats are difficult, yeah, but they are a piece of piss compared to rye. Rye is an absolute nightmare, unless you have it fresh off the grain and you dry it out slightly, and then you start to grow it, and then you're using it as a half malted, which is called green rye or green barley, which was big in Irish whiskey before.
Well, here, just to interrupt a second, are there any of the drams here that I might, because I have your first tasting box and I haven't been able to open it yet, so is there anything here yet that isn't that one that you're going to try? Or
no, was there rye in the one the other night? I think there might have been.
I'll just check.
Our last one, Phil, you might want to try our last one, which was the we just talked about the PX. We went through the PX non-GI, which is a fascinating drop, and it's probably drinkable now as it is, even though it's only a few months old.
So that's number one from your first box. So no, I don't have any rye. I have the potching, I have your burgundy cask, the oak cask, the peated cask, and then I have your rum, which I'm definitely looking forward to trying.
Shit. Well, you may just stay with us then for the crack and your knowledge. You've been with us from the start. I remember, because you're the grumpiest, most arrogant influencer in the industry. You came up to visit us that time, and I was absolutely shitting bricks. I was like, I'm and you were like, I give you a taste in the cask, and you're like, this is good stuff, but I'm going to go home and taste this in a dark room. But luckily, your feedback was very constructive and very promising. So, it'll give you good confidence going forward.
I don't. I think most people who do make me realize that I'm not naturally that grumpy, but
no, you're a lovely family.
The thing is that whenever you end up writing for malt and stuff, that you kind of have to have a very cynical attitude, I suppose. Well, not cynical, but we tell it how it is, and we're unapologetic, and that's,
it's it's truthful, it's proper truth, and that's what we need. But I've been slobbering about this now for so long. We're running, guys. Hit a bit of the rye, right? It's number 4 in your. So this actually ended up being 95% rye and 5% oats. So with that 5% oats, we smoked it in our shed. So this is lightly peated. Basically, you're drinking lightly peated rye. So we've got Killowen smoked oats mixed with rye, heavily smoked with Donegal turf in the shed, put into the mash tun with 95% rye. So Pierce tar would stop breaking our fucking paddles. And you get a smell of that. Like when you drink, my favorite rye in the world is Belgrove Distillery rye, and it's it's like mint sauce you would put in your lamb on your lamb shank type of thing. This actually has a bit of that mint sauce and that crushed down mint leaf with vinaigrette and mashed together and left to get stale and lie in your fridge and stick to.
So is there any reason why you use Donegal peat? Because I'm sure there must be peat bogs around Killowen.
There's peat bogs in the morning. You got a wee bit of morn turf in it. It's like coal. It's great, but in the last few years, turf cutting is falling out of fashion massively. Newton Hamilton in South Armagh, for example, is only a little bit up the road, and about 10 years ago, there's about 10 turf cutting families in Newton Hamilton. Now there's none. There's massive changes in society that are happening, without us realising. Go to Australia for years and come back, and it's very sad to see. Cutting turf was a massive part of our tradition for many, many years, and now it's just gone. But luckily, the Brogans are still at it in Donegal, so we've got a good, and plus it's free. You don't even have to buy the stuff.
Oh, happy days, brilliant!
Most of the time it smoulders instead of combusting, so it's great. But that this to me is gorgeous. it's full of those menthol notes, and it's absolutely spice. So Rob Falvey's going to bring us up some curry, Pete. That's brilliant. From the kingdom of Kerry to the kingdom of Mourne.
Well, I mean, we all know that there's only one real true kingdom, Brendan. Is that right? You know.
That's it. You're going to say the Glens, are you?
Of course I am. It wouldn't be like the Irish to start infighting already, wouldn't it? We've only started speaking to each other for 5 minutes, and we'll fight each other over who's got the best kingdom.
Dalriada.
That's it.
So I don't know. This to me, what happened with this cask, right? So we get this rye and we put it into this guy who sold us the casks earlier on. I was talking about that Pinot Noir, that Burgundy Pinot Noir cask. Sold us these as well, and we asked them to be heavily charred and insisted don't do that. So we put this into those casks the same way we did with our Pinot Noir, and it ruined this. So what we had to do, we took it out and we put it into ex-bourbon casks, quarter casks around it. I was considering phoning HMRC and getting it destroyed.
Right.
In the last few years, that Pinot Noir influence has lifted massively, and those heavily charred quarter bourbon casks that we got has rescued the spirit. And in fact, that Pinot Noir influence now is sitting in there, and it's just making it more spicy, and that European wood spice. Do you remember you were up and you tasted some of the stuff out of those casks, and it was just too aggressive?
I mean, that was one of the things about the Pinot Noir that I actually couldn't believe, or was it? No, it was the Pinot Noir. I mean, like you'd only had that liquid in for like something like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And the color on it was like just so intense.
And the flavor came with it.
Yeah, and the flavor came with it. So I think definitely a very careful balancing act with that stuff.
Again, the spice from the rye with the wood spice, with the pot still the spice as well. It's just phenomenal. I'm going to put water in that. That's I think I haven't tasted that. I don't know. I think mine might be tasted. I tasted this one. We were giving it to Belfast Whiskey Week, and I'm tasting it again now, and it's much more rounded again. It's funny because the weather turned. We give this to you guys when it was the heat waves, and a few of the samples that I pulled out of my casks today are different because whenever it gets cold, the stuff just pushes back into the wood again. The wood starts to close up, and with that, the liquid shoots back in, and with it, it brings in those tannins and whatever else has been in there before. Nice. You're getting a bit of butterscotch in with this now, as well as that minty note. And Phil, I'll send you up a sample of this.
It is. Well, I mean, the thing was, you see, Brendan, the annoying thing was because I bought box 1, I wasn't allowed to buy box 2. So.
Well, if you had given me a wee brown envelope, I could have passed you one.
Well, that's I never thought of that. So I'm just wondering if any of the guys want to, like, there's Dan. Hello again, Dan. How are you? He's saying he's getting loads of menthol and nutty notes in this. Really palatable.
Oh, good man, Dan. Good to see you. Dan, this distilled Dan, isn't it?
It is. I think Dan's obviously spent a few quid in boxes this week.
Dan's a good man. I remember meeting Dan and his brother and his father at a whiskey tasting. I think it was in 57, the Headline. Way back. It was the Dunville's tasting. This is probably a few years back. And they're a lovely family and all whiskey enthusiasts. And he was trying to bring his brother on board.
Right.
And it was a great day's crack. And I suppose that's the wonderful thing about the Irish whiskey industry is the people that you can meet.
Oh, absolutely.
And Sergius is in here. Rob, Matt Morrison. Look, we've got Keith McAlevey. Keith McAlevey used to be in school with me. We've got all these, Conor Keenan. We've got all these here legends that are involved, and Louise, who is just such a diehard lady, brilliant.
Well, she has a liver that we could all die for. To be fair,
I know the liver of steel, hard.
Exactly.
Must be that Belfast thing.
It must be. That's it. I mean, well, to be fair, it's all that cocktail drinking's hardened her up.
It is indeed. Keith the liver with his free box. Oh dear. But no, it's great. It really is great. But,
yeah, Robert's in there. He could imagine that with a bit of lamb there, Brendan.
Sorry?
Robert's in there. He could imagine your rye with a bit of lamb, all right.
Actually, when it comes down to food pairing, this would be perfect with lamb. Yeah, it really would. It's fascinating stuff. It's probably my favourite in the distillery right now that I've tasted it again. But I'm not going to lie, I've been drinking solidly all day, so there's been It's absurd. I was doing meetings. We were in and out of tourism meetings all day for the distillery, and I can't even remember what we're talking to these guys about. So we're talking.
Sure, listen to you a bit, Brendan, doesn't it? You know what I mean?
Agreed, it did. And then nobody would go in. Like, you've rescued me now, and nobody was rescuing Fanon, so I jumped in with Fanon, and
Right.
Sure, I was drinking all the 1970s stuff.
How did that go, by the way? I'm sure that must have been like quite
Amazing.
an experience.
It's just a complete argument in support of reform of the GI. We have to give the benefit of the doubt to the people in the industry now. They don't need to be so defensive of the GI. They've done a good job, but they need to reform it. Full respect to them. Please change the GI, and then Killowen pot still would be legitimate instead of some sort of an outcast, whenever it's actually probably more truthful than anything else. You know.
Well, it's interesting, Brennan, because I don't know if you read my latest piece on malt, which was a blind tasting piece.
When was that? No.
It was last Friday. So
no, I haven't.
Alex in San Francisco Whiskey Club sent me 3 samples. Well, he didn't send them to me, actually. We met last February at like the Glasgow Open Rare.
Yeah.
He gave me 3 samples. Thank you, Brian. And Alex's thing is you have to taste all whiskey blind, right? So for their club, the price doesn't really come into it. It's just basically strip away all the extraneous crap, the brands and all the rest of it, and you judge the liquid solely on the merits of what you have in your glass, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is a slight departure from us at Malt, because obviously we like to add value to things as well because of what people are expecting to spend and so on.
Yeah.
But so obviously I have a mixed history with blind tastings on malt because I gave a Springbank 15 a 3 out of 10. And which led to
controversial.
torches and pitchforks coming to the door. Anyway, he sent me these. So the first 2 samples I swore were Scotches. And the first one I thought was like an old 70s or 80s Glenfarclas. I thought the second one was probably a Glen Scotia or possibly a Clynelish, something like that. But I reckon the second one was about 18 or 20 years old.
Yeah.
And the third one I knew straight away was definitely an all sherry redbreast. I just had that, once you smelt the nose.
Yeah.
It turned out they were all. So the first one was the old 7-year-old pure pot still Jameson or Powers.
Yeah.
Powers Gold. And the second one was a 1965 12-year-old redbreast US import. And do you see the industrial heft of that old redbreast? Like, I mean, you could taste the coal from the stills. It was just it was just a dirty, oily, filthy dram.
But you enjoyed it, didn't you?
Oh,
like a big McDonald's.
I mean, the way I looked at it, Brennan, was it's no wonder that people were after Irish whiskey. It was that good.
You do, yeah. You do. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. You need oil and you need smokiness. You need oil and smokiness. You know what I mean? You go. Some people have a kebab. Some people go for a Chinese. Some people go for a.
Exactly.
You need those. You need those sorts of things. I'm looking for basically our next bottle, guys. Okay, is going to be the festival bottling. So you're very lucky here because you have a festival bottling. I don't.
Yes, I do. Why don't I get that?
Phil is going to talk you through the tasting notes on this. My festival bottling got broken by Andy from the London distillery. So there was 111 bottles. Now there are only 110. Yes, because you guys got to devour them. So this stuff got sold out. It's put into a ballot, and rightfully only the first people are allowed to buy it are festival holder tickets. Ticket holders. There's going to be a bit of a fight about this.
You're not going to believe this, but my computer is actually resting on the box at the minute. So hold on a wee second, guys. I'll just.
That's all right. Work away. I'll slobber for a wee minute. This bottle, this bottling is awesome, and we're very proud of it. It's not part of the Killowen Bonded Experimental Series. It says in the bottle Killowen Exclusive Series. So the bottling, it's lovely stuff, and it's a single malt whiskey. And what we done, why there's so little bottles, is because Paul's version of this story and my version of the story are different, because he was unsure about a festival bottling, and he wanted something small. So we got a firkin. So we got a 200-litre cask, and we broke it down into a firkin, which is 55 litres. Meant to be 50 litres, but we fit 55 into it anyway. And we made this beautiful little cask, and it was from Appleton Distillery in Jamaica, which is just a lovely signature rum. And that rum, I know, goes very well with that stock that comes from North Antrim, this 12-year-old stock that comes from North Antrim. But unfortunately, it was sitting out of a cask it was sitting on an IBC for a few months, so we can't actually call it 12-year-old. So we're calling it 10-year-old, and so it is 10-year-old. And but it's been finished in this wonderful cask, and lovely stuff. We just wanted to be safe.
Finish again, Brandon?
Sorry, Phil?
How long was the finish on the rum cask?
The finish was minimal. It was probably about 5 months, if less, but no, even less. It was sitting, but we had nowhere to put it. So what we did is we put it against our wash still in the wintertime.
Okay.
So if you imagine it in the wintertime, right, and it's beside your wash still, flame-fed wash still, very high temperatures, and then in the nighttime, low temperatures, high temperature, and there was stuff was leaking. It was leaking whiskey all the time, and so we must have been about 60 litres in there probably. So if you go to Speyside for them to make your casks, make sure you measure what you put into them. Okay. So we must have lost a huge amount of the initial share here, but the influence of in and out of that wood was fantastic. And you got this here heavily charred Cooper, a dark rum cask. So this Bushmills is beautiful liquid, amazing distillery. Cast strength.
I think, funnily enough, that if you speak to a lot of people who talk about some of the old Bushmills expressions, that there used to be the 12-year-old Caribbean rum cask, and that's one of the fan favorites. People always go on about it, about how good it was. So it seems to be that Bushmills is a liquid that can work well with rum. So.
Indeed, guaranteed. Paul Keane is doing a tasting in a few days' time called Bushmills After Dark.
Yeah. That
is basically, he says he's telling the guys up there what he thinks they should do. Full respect for everything that they do, but they're a successful distillery and they're a powerhouse for Ulster whiskey. Yeah. So we have to keep that in mind too.
Well, the thing is, hopefully the guys at Jose Cuervo will eventually start listening to grumpy idiots like me, and a number of other people, and start putting things out at least 46% and start giving us a few of these. We're already seeing what they're doing with the US releases, like the 28-year-old cognac cask.
Yeah.
You're kind of like lads, why not paying homage to the Irish market first, and at least allowing us even to try that at the same time as America. I think that's very poor business. But anyway, that's a by and by. But
I know what you're saying.
But yeah, so that's here, the nose in this is just superb.
I'd love to lean into your window there and just take a wee drink of that. You get a lot of, I don't know, tell us your tasting notes in there. What are you getting out of it?
Well, so the nose, you get those very definite, Bushmills, tropical fruit. So I get a lot of melon and peach. There's a bit of apricot going on there as well. But the thing that really comes through for me is there's crystallized stem ginger in the nose. So that you're getting a bit of the spice from those dark rum casks. And there definitely is there's a very slight hint of coconut going on. But the other thing the rum does is it really highlights, I think, the apple notes that are in Bushmills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's such a sweet and fruity nose. That's the thing.
It is. It's interesting stuff. It's fantastic to see. I think we played it very safe. We normally try to be bold and do stuff very different. We played it very safe with this one. I was mixing this liquid with drops of red wine, drops of Chocolina again, lots of really funky stuff, and I'm mixing it together. And I just said, do you know what? This is amazing stuff. And I'm just going to play it safe. And we put a bit of rum. We put what's it called again? The other plantation rum. We put plantation rum in with it, and you know what? It was perfect with plantation rum. And I said, well, do you know what? We're going to just go with this apple and rum cask. So we phoned up was amazing the turnaround we got from Speyside Cooperage this time. Malcolm, he's got good respect for tiny distilleries, even though we're a minute part of his business. And he's sent us this beautiful cask, handmade, because they get a big cask. So you pay for a big cask and the labour of guys. It isn't a machine doing it, and they carved it up. And every stave they have to reshave, put it down in this cute little cask. And Paul told me the other day he needs it back, and I was like, well, I already have Killowen rum sitting in that. And he was like, all right, well, get it out, give me the cask back. Fair enough. He's going to pay for it, so I better give him it back.
Fair enough. What's the ABV again in this, Brendan?
The ABV, it was cask strength at, is it in the little card? You know what? Somebody's going to shout now because somebody has the card. You know.
I think it was 58 something. 55.6.
Okay. 55.6, which is pretty powerful for an old whiskey, you know.
Yeah.
Daniel come up with some good notes there. Lots of apple, lemon drops, pineapple, mango, rum casks are cracking. What's thinking about? Dead right. They are indeed. There's apple and lemon drops, pineapple and mango, and as Phil has said, there's coconut in there. There definitely is coconut, and that like milky coconut stuff. You know, it's great.
The mouthfeel is really creamy because I think of the ABV as well, which I think massively helps Bushmills anyway. Interestingly, I find with the Bushmills cask strengths is they don't need water. They're so drinkable at cask strength, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I would agree with Dan there. I mean, definitely, like, I'm getting like charred pineapple, like barbecue pineapple. There's definitely, you can get a bit of how would that compare to the spring length? There's no comparison, Charles. Okay,
it's coming back. Coming back to haunt you.
Like, I mean, Springbank sometimes do stuff that's brilliant. Sometimes they do stuff that's horrendous. But we love them because of the fact that they're inconsistent. And when they do things right, they do it phenomenally well. And actually, I mean, that's one of the things about your distillery, Brendan, that I'm actually hoping to see. Like, I mean, I'm not.
What? You're hoping to see something shit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think that inconsistency is great. I mean,
it is.
And the thing about it is, I mean, that will end up, you'll have a brand loyalty because of that anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and I think people are wanting to buy into that straight away because they know that, you know, everything's handmade. There's no computers on site. Like, you're working with direct fed stills, so like, I mean, that produces inconsistently straight away, which is like, it's going to be great because, I mean, the thing about it is that what you want people to talk about is whenever, I'm not saying you're going to produce something that's like absolutely so awful that it's like West Cork, you know, peat charred casks that I had to pour down the toilet. Do you know what I mean? But it's on the blog, guys. Sorry, Brendan, but the thing is that, you know, whenever it's like that kind of inconsistency, like, that's to be applauded. Do you know what I mean? And actually, I applaud West Cork for even trying that, even though it didn't work. Fair play.
Fair play. You know, exactly. They're an amazing place. Yeah.
So, like, at the end of the day, it's just one of those things that, like, sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. Don't worry about it. So
exactly. So I think we've had 8 high strength drinks to date. Everybody in this group has. If you were in the previous tastings, you probably had about, I don't know, 40. We went on that last one because it was lovely stuff. We actually had a Pinot Noir, or we had a port cask finish earlier on with the same stock, but this has been aged. The stuff earlier on was aged consistently. This had stopped aging and then was put in again. So amazing stuff. But what we've got here now is what we're going to try now is our dark rum. Do you have that in your tasting set as well, Phil? I think you might.
I have the rum. Your actual made rum.
Yeah, that's coming up next. So, folks, traditionally whiskey tasting works in that, you know, they'd save the best tasting to last. I don't know. This isn't really that it's going to be the best tasting or anything. If I wanted to do that, I would hold the non-GI pot still Killowen and the peated PX cask to last. But for this, I was thinking of your palates. And because we're doing 9 whiskies in a row, we thought if you drink a high strength rum, the way this Killowen rum is, it would taint your palate going forward. So I wanted to save your palate and let you taste it at the end. And that little rum cask finish was a move towards that. So you've got a nod to what rum is. This rum that you're going to drink now is more rum than any rum that exists in the world.
Can I say thank you for gifting us all the wee floaty bits in there?
Exactly. We've had complaints about that over the last few days, and I had so much fun laughing. I don't know. I went to bed last night, probably about 2:30 in the morning, and I was in stitches at the complaints that we got. I got an email from this new guy in Celtic Whiskey Shop, and I was like, "Speak to Ali." You know, don't even talk about it. And then there was a guy complaining, and he put it up in Killowen Cult, and everybody. But in fairness, they had respect to the young fella. Fair play to him. But yeah, you know, no frustration. I see another large distillery in Ireland. The biggest distillery in Ireland has copied us as well since.
There you go.
Let them do it.
About time. At the end of the day, we should have been getting this done at the start anyway, Brendan.
Exactly.
Okay.
What bottle is this now? This is I'm not gonna lie, I'm fully lit at this stage. It's been a big week, big day, and I think it's number 5, isn't it?
Yeah, number 5. Robert Foley said, yeah.
So Pierce is obviously looking out for me. You only give me a half bottle. Well, in fairness, this is bloody strong. What does it say it is in the card? I think I diluted it down for the Whiskey Club because it's a little bit stronger in our cask.
Right.
So
the card was saying here, Brendan, that it was 50%.
50%. So right, 50%. Well, I diluted it down for you because mine's actually about 68. So it's not because alcohol is strong, but because there's just so much flavor in there. I thought we were taking it earlier on in the tasting. It'll just crush your palate going forward. So it's still full on at 50%. It's so full on. So taste it at 50 if you want. Have a nose, but I advise you to taste it, then add water and taste it again.
It's a very interesting nose, Brendan. So how was this made then? So you're saying it was made with molasses.
Yeah, so 60% molasses and then 40% sugar. We also use 1 litre of tomato juice and 1 litre of pineapple juice or else orange juice only as a nutrient. So that's minuscule. So we have 1,100 litre, 1,100 litre fermentations, and 2 litres are of a nutrient. So we don't buy nutrients because it's bananas, what they cost. So we throw in a bit of tomato juice and a wee bit of orange juice. So the yeast, the dry yeast, we only use dry yeast. Dry yeast is something to feed off.
Okay.
The dry yeast gets in there and feeds off it and then reacts with it. So like the old distilleries of old, all we use is dry yeast. We don't use slurries or anything like that.
Okay.
And it adds taste of cat piss, which is nice, small doses. But there might be something there or to advice to advance the ones there.
Dan's coming through. It's really floral. He's getting Turkish delight. I mean, it's floral, Dan, but actually, do you know what I'm getting? I'm getting like Manuka honey.
It's just
it's not a harsh floral thing. I mean, this is like I can imagine like going through like heather. Do you know what I mean? Like smelling heather and getting that Manuka honey. There's a creaminess to it as well.
And there's the obvious licorice note that comes from that blackstrap molasses. But one key way that this stuff is aged, we use a Solera method. So I know Sherry uses Solera method, and they do it over, they got their 10-year and their 20-year and the 15-year or whatever. Yeah. At Killowen, we've got our 6 month, 2 month, 1 month, and we're vatting them down. So we've got these, firkins at the bottom, and then we've got these quarters in the middle, and then we've got these wine casks at the top, which are 225 litres. So our wine casks are very heavily charred.
Okay.
Cabernet, Sauvignon, wine butts. They're only ever half full. So there's a lot of aging going in there and a lot of wine, fruitiness coming in. Then we move them down into our bourbon quarters.
Okay.
And then, our 1 bourbon quarter and 1 PX. And they're integrating in there, and then they're moved down into our firkins.
Right.
All right. So what I've got today, the firkins have only been added in. So what you've got hasn't got firkins. What I've got has got firkins.
Okay.
the Firkins have given it this massive butterscotch note, and it's now ready for market.
I mean, Robert's saying there he's getting licorice all sorts, and totally.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think like that kind of. Do you know the ones you get that have the black licorice in the middle and then like the coconutty, like pink coconut on the outside?
Yeah, exactly.
Robert said that, and that's all I could think of straight away. I'm like, yeah,
exactly. No, good man, Robert. You're 100% right. Matt Morrison. Matt, what do you think?
States, fair play.
I know he's a good lad. He's the founder of Killowen Cult. I'm
Oh,
glad
is
he allowed me into the group.
Oh, fair play. Well, I suppose you should be.
Him and John McDougall, Ian Garrett. But this to me is just reeks of potential and reeks of boldness and what you can do with a small still. All of the really heavy rums you taste nowadays are still too apologetic. Rum of old tasted like this. Rum of old was consumed. Irish whiskey consumed rum just as much as they consumed whiskey. We imported shitloads of rum.
Yeah.
Sean O'Connor is a testament to this research. And we drank as much rum as we did whiskey, even in the absolute prime of Irish whiskey times. And it's fascinating.
I would love to try this at Imperial Proof. You know,
come on up anytime.
I'll be down. I'll definitely be down, Brennan. But like, even at 50%.
Thomas is there in Germany. So Thomas, are you in Germany as well?
Yes.
So we've got Germans, Hungarians, Americans, all sorts of Irish.
But the thing is, Brendan, the reason why there's so many people in is because like what you're doing is genuinely exciting. I mean, like as you were saying before I came on, like I mean, unfortunately, you know, Ireland has been sold down this mythology of smoothness, and if you, as you have experienced yourself with your tasting with Fionn, like you try stuff. I mean, I'll tell you the other one that Alex from San Francisco Whiskey. I met him in December last year, and he brought me over a 1920s. It's a 20-year-old distilled in the 1920s Tullamore Dew, back in whenever the dailies owned it, and it is unlike any Irish whiskey I've ever tried. And you know, that's the thing is like we know that what you're going to produce is going to be like we're harking back to the days of yore when things were like, you know, this is what people wanted to drink, and you know, it was like royals and everything were drinking this stuff, and
exactly.
it's gonna be class. I know that anyway. So,
thank you, and I don't care if we do make the odd mistake, like a similar distillery in Scotland. It's part of the journey, and you still love them for it, you know. So, yeah, we are going to make mistakes. In fact, we have made mistakes. I'm not going to lie, and we spend a lot of time trying to correct them by vatting and putting it into different casks. And it's mad. Don't think it's a learning curve, and it's amazing the amount of knowledge you pick up.
Absolutely, and the thing is, though, Brendan, as well, that like how often do people get to come along on a journey with a distillery?
Yeah.
You know,
we really appreciate that too.
And I think that's actually one of the exciting things for a lot of the distilleries coming up now, is that we're all going to be there. You know, whether it's small producers like yourself, whether it's medium size, whether it's guys that have more grandiose plans, like some of the other guys down in and like I just think it's a really good time to be in the Irish whiskey scene. I know it is very exciting stuff like.
And everybody knows everybody, and anybody who jumps in, they're most welcome into the fold. And everybody's welcome. There's a new influencer, there's a new guy chatting, or there's a new whiskey collector. Yeah, it's great to know you.
I mean, the thing is, on the taste there, Brendan. Like, I mean, I think those floral notes come through, but as well. But it's not a sickly floralness. Again, like it's quite round. It's bold.
For me, it's a bit too heavy on the acidity of the molasses, personally. But maybe if you lost that, maybe it wouldn't be good. So I don't know how much of that we want to lose.
Yeah.
So a lot of that's gone out of mine now, but it's still there because of those little bourbon firkins that we've got sitting in right now. And it's only a few days, and it's turned around something shocking. So we'll release this at Christmas time.
Yeah,
and,
it's such a fruity drink as well. Like, and that's the thing as well. Like, I mean, it's
you can make a million cocktails out of that,
absolutely.
and a bit more. And yeah, I'm loving it. And I think this is our bloody last whiskey. So if anybody else wants to write stuff, please feel Keith, McAlevey, Connor, Keenan, any of you guys that are involved in the chat right now, shout out with the rest of the guys. Any of the other guys, just shout away at your tasting notes.
Shy guy, that's the whole point. Why you're here is to interact.
This is the most intimate tasting of all. This is the smallest one.
Yeah,
with the biggest volume.
And remember, guys, as well, it's not often that you get time to chat to a master distiller. You know what I mean? And the thing of a distillery, the same goes for the next tasting as well. Just remember that. So I mean, you want to be. Yeah, Robert, I've let Michael know that we're probably going to be going on about 6:15 here. So
I started 15 minutes early, so sorry.
Oh, no bother. So what's the last whiskey here, Brendan?
That's it. This is it. I think I'm nearly sure we've gone through them all. If anybody else wants to tell me if we've missed it out any, that's fine. But I think we have a great tasting so far. Mick McGuire, I'm not gonna lie. Mick, you're a legend. Good man.
Yeah. And Thomas is saying we're allowed to travel to Ireland again, which we hope so, Thomas, because it would actually be good to spend a bit of time with you, because I know we only got to meet at Whiskey Live this year, and it was a really fleeting hello and whatever. It'd be nice to share a dram with you at some point, Thomas.
Thomas, you're in Germany. Listen to me. Right, Marika Switzer is starting off this amazing German whiskey festival, and she is basing it on the brilliance of this whiskey festival that's been set up by the likes of Phil and Jamie and Paul Kane and Jason and everybody who's got involved. So she's learned from it and seen how it can be done. So luckily, all of the whiskey things that have been set up in Germany haven't been cancelled. There's one that's going to go ahead, and Killowen are going to participate in it. So yeah, there's a bit of something to look forward to.
Happy days, lad.
Yeah. Good news.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, the more things like this here, Brendan, the better, really, isn't it?
It is indeed. Yeah, the more out there, the better. It's funny when you dilute this down. I've just diluted this down, and I'm guarantee it's at about 38% or something. It still tastes fantastic, which is.
Well, the thing is,
you've been making from yours now. You've done that.
I'm saving the rest of mine, Brendan, because I want to try mine in the away from camera and stuff like that, and give it a bit of proper due consideration. I mean, the thing about it is, whenever I seen the rum in there, I was delighted to see something like that. I mean, like an Irish made rum, fantastic. Do you know what I mean?
And why not? So we use a thumper keg. We use a thumper keg for it as well. I forgot to throw that in. Yeah. We don't use it. We put this thing in between the wash still and the condenser. It's called a thumper keg. They call it a thumper because moonshiners, you make them and it shakes about. It goes. Matt Morrison will jump into this. It thumps. It goes bump, 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 bump. You think the place is going to blow up. It's fucking scary sometimes, and it's wobbling and shaking. But it's full of rectification. So the sulfates that are in the molasses, which are pretty off-putting, are reacting with all of that extra copper in the process. So if you use 2 thumper kegs, you don't need to use second distillation. 2 thumper kegs equates for a second distillation. So if you use 1 still with 2 thumper kegs, or a doubler, as they're also known as, you have double distilled product. And that's how moonshiners make their stuff a lot of the time. They have 2 doublers on 1 still. And you save a huge amount of fuel. It's a very efficient process. It shouldn't be used a lot more. But whenever we do it, we only have 1. We only have 1 rather than 2. And that means this is basically like 2.5 times distilled. So it's taken a little bit of that flavour out. Could you imagine if we didn't have a thumper keg in that? It would probably rip the mouth clean out of you.
A bit of a nod to that sort of Scottish distillery that we were mentioning earlier on, that they do 2.5 times distillation as well. So
they do indeed, and all the Jamaican distilleries make rum with 1 still and 2 doublers, 2 thumpers. That's how they do it.
Well, you ever consider doing that with some of your whiskey?
We had considered it, but I remember it was the couple of times that I attended those pathetic meetings that were held with Irish Association. I forwarded that to a very respected person in the industry who literally rolled his eyes and said, "That wouldn't be whiskey then, would it? You could call it a blend." So I didn't want to walk out. I was sitting at the front of the room and being respectful. But I just left as soon as there's a recess. I was like, I'm never going back near that place again.
Well, I appreciate you. I don't want to rally you up in case you say anything.
No, I'm not saying anything because I fully respect what institutions. I have absolute massive respect for institutions, but sometimes places go in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
And,
you know,
institutions think collectively.
Yeah.
They always do. Institutions always think collectively. Every so often there's a spark that puts them back in the right direction. So hopefully there's no conflict of interest, but hopefully things move in the right direction. You know, Liam, I'm not going to say anything. All's good. It's all love. One love, one industry.
Oh dear.
Brilliant. Here we're going to let the Boan guys on, and we're going to hear from them. Is Michael coming? Who's talking for Boan?
It's going to be Michael Walsh. So
why they should just jump in now with us, and then I'll say cheers.
Actually, we can say to the admin here if Michael can just be.
I think that's probably the best way, and then the can cut everybody out who's not involved or whatever.
Yeah, and then we can seamlessly seek into Boan.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm not going to lie, Boan are absolutely brilliant. We have a lot of respect for them too. Oh, they give us a cask. Who did they give us a cask? We needed a bourbon cask very urgently one day, and they sold it to us there and then, which is fantastic.
That's a great story as well. The fact that there's this ability to help each other out. That's fantastic that people are doing that. I know you've had that similar experience with the guys at Ecklandville as well.
Massively, yeah, massively. Ecklandville,
brilliant. Because that's not actually looking at someone as a competitor; it's looking at someone as a compatriot.
There's no point. If anybody's ever been to Isla, they all love each other and they all look out for each other. They lend each other staff, they lend each other equipment and machinery, especially in the wintertime when the boats aren't on. So, I don't think there's much we can do for a beast like Boan, but they can certainly help us out, and they have done.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great testament to what's happening in the Irish whiskey industry. Whenever, especially the smaller guys and stuff are helping each other out, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And
the Coonies are wonderful. They understand that everything takes hard work, and they're lovely people. So. Yeah. Plus, there's always Matt Healy as well, so you can't forget about him.
Do I understand that correctly, Brendan? Are you offering us staff? Are you
No, I think we usually try to steal your staff, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, I'm gonna just disappear quickly for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
No problem.
I understand. Michael, I'll keep you company until one of your comrades comes along and rescues you. So.
I think that was just myself and Phil. Matt was meant to be on with me, but he's decided to go off on holidays.
Oh well, that happens. Where's he back to America again? I suppose. He's in Carty. He climbed Carntoohil.
He's down in my neck of the woods. He's down around Kerry. Last he was spotted anyway, or I think he might have been in Cork or traveling around.
Yeah. No, he wasn't Kerry. He was up in Carntoohil. It's in McGillicuddy's, isn't it?
Yeah, in around Killarney. I think he was down in Mizzen Head there yesterday morning or something. Anyway.
Very good. You get away yourself?
You know what it is now. That's what I was saying. If you had any spare staff, I was hoping to get down to Kerry myself this weekend, but we've a maintenance week this week, and the shadow or the dim lighting here is probably doing me a lot of favors because the bag's under my eyes now after the last 3 days.
I've got a bright one showing off mine, so there's been a lot of booze and a lot of work, but here, look, this is the closest thing to a summer holiday I think we're going to get. Enjoyable work.
If I could tell by your passion about what you're talking about there, and I think we're in the same boat. It's hard work and it's long hours and whatever, but I wouldn't swap it out.
No,
less to be able to do something that's enjoyable. Sometimes there's a bit of cursing and questioning involved, but
yeah. I remember the day we desperately needed a cask and you rolled it up the ramp for me. It was a good one. Somebody got it. One of our cask owners got it. We needed to fill it in there, and then they did fill it, and it was quality, but very fresh. You use a good contacts.
Yeah, we get them so they're emptied, put straight on a container, shipped straight out, taken straight out, and usually we have a bit of bulk spirit built up, so we're we're pulling through enough, so we're filling them fresh. And I'd say you collected that day. We weren't long after getting into delivery. So as quick as the boat from America.
It was bourbon pissing out of it. It was great. It was good stuff. The dog, good to see. Good to see. Very good.
Right. Happy days, lads.
Well, here, lads, slán well. Anyway.
Here, Brendan, thanks very much for the crack, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.